Everybody, and welcome to this new session of our doctoral seminar series. My name is Yosimbom. I'm a junior research fellow at UMA, the Institute for Humanities in Africa at the University of Cape Town. The seminar is now streaming on Facebook, and you will find a recording in a few hours or days on our YouTube channel. In the doctoral seminar series, we invite our guests to reflect on the challenges and strategies of doctoral work, on the concept they use, with a particular focus on turning points, critical experiences that shaped their research journey as doctoral and postdoctoral fellows. Our speaker today is my colleague at UMA, postdoctoral fellow, Dr. Hassan Yosimbom. He has chosen to discuss decoloniality and Africanization of African studies. Hassan Yosimbom holds a BA in English and Linguistics, a master's degree in comparative literature from the University of Buea in Cameroon, a postgraduate diploma in education, and a PhD in African literature from the University of Yaoundé 1 in Cameroon as well. He has previously held postdoctoral positions at the Center for Urban Management Studies at the University of Ghana, Legon, and also position at the Center for African Studies at the University of Cape Town. And he's currently an African Intellectual Biographies Fellow at UMA, the Institute for Humanities in Africa at the University of Cape Town. So welcome, dear Hassan. We are so very lucky to have you and so excited to hear about your research. You have the floor. Or I'm informed that he might have connection issues. So we knew that could happen. He's probably going to be able to reconnect in a few seconds. So let us wait for him, I guess. Do we have some music to help us wait in the meantime? Okay. I'm going to, okay, let me look for Hassan in the chat. It's a tough moment not to have our guest because he has not started to discuss anything, so we don't have any really material to discuss. So let's wait in music.
Hello, Dom.
So you're here.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Thank you so much, Dom, for the gracious introduction. I wish to thank UMA for having invited me for this session. It's a wonderful opportunity, and I'm really grateful. I want to say good afternoon to the various colleagues who are online. Thank you for having come to share in my discussion. As you indicated, Dom, my discussion is titled Researching Decoloniality and Africanizing Post-Colonial Research in Africa, Opportunities and Challenges. I've watched television over the past 2, 3, or 4 days after the demise of the Queen of England, and something intrigued me. A lot of things intrigued me that have a bit of a bearing on what I'm going to talk about today. I looked at the various reactions. A reaction like the one from the politician from South Africa, Julius Malema, who actually came out with a statement and said they were not going to mourn a monarch who had done a lot of bad things to them. I also followed the Twitter war between Piers Morgan and the Nigerian professor, the professor of Nigerian origin, Uju Anya, who is a lecturer at the University of Carnegie Mellon. The war that has been going on when the lady learned that the queen was about to die and then tweeted that she would be very happy if the queen were to suffer for the atrocities she committed during the Nigerian Civil War. Other people like Jeff Bezos and the other people came in to try to counteract what she had said. Piers Morgan even tried to invite the lady for an interview, possibly to threaten her for having dared to try to decolonize a few things about the British monarchy. But the lady refused and said outrightly that she knows that Piers Morgan's career took a downward turn sometime in the past, and that she will not allow herself to be used by Piers Morgan to revive his career. I say this in relation to the fact that my presentation draws on some of those arguments, and my presentation actually draws from a text by Chinua Achebe. The title of the text is Hour of God, and I begin by borrowing an expression from one of the most famous decolonialists, Walter D. Mignolo, who says that the reason why we are still talking about decoloniality and decolonization is that coloniality is not all over. It is everywhere. It is not over, it is all over, as he puts it. My presentation draws on Hour of God. There are these two characters in Hour of God. There is the chief priest of Ulu, whose name is Ezeolu, and then there is his rival in the community, Waka. At some point, when the British colonialists, they come to Umuaru, the chief priest of Ulu, Ezeolu, decides to welcome them and then sends his son, Oduche, to go and study in the primary school that is established by the colonial masters. And then at some point, the district officer, Ezeolu happens to be an authority in Igbo land. At some point, the district officer, Captain Winterbottom, summons Ezeolu to his place and tells him that he wants him to be there in an hour's time. And then Ezeolu calls the community now to seek permission from them, whether he should answer the call. And then Waka says something that is very important. I'll read a quote from there. What Waka tells Ezeolu during that gathering. Ezeolu has told us that the white ruler has asked him to go to Okperi. Now it is not clear to me whether it is wrong for a man to ask his friend to visit him. When we have a feast, do we not send for our friends in other clans to come and share with us? And do they not ask us to their own celebrations? The white man is Ezeolu's friend and has sent for him. What is so strange about that? He did not send for me, nor did he send for the priest of Ogugu to come to see him. He has asked Ezeolu. Why? Because they are friends. Or does Ezeolu think that their friendship should stop short of entering each other's house? Does he want the white man to be his friend only by word of mouth? Did not the elders tell us that as soon as we shake hands with a leper, he will want to embrace? It seems to me that Ezeolu has shaken hands with a man of white blood, and a man of white blood, he is a leper. What I say is this: a man who brings ant-ridden faggots into his herd should expect the visit of lizards. But if Ezeolu is now telling us that he is tired of the white man's friendship, our advice to him should be, you tied the knot, you should also know how to undo it. You pass the shit that is smelly, you should carry it away. Fortunately, the evil charm brought in at the end of the pole is not too difficult to take outside again. I quote this because I think that what decoloniality and what decolonialists have been trying to do is, we have been trying all throughout history to untie this knot and then to carry this shit that is smelly, because that's what colonization is all about. So I frame my argument on the fact that if we consider the argument between Ezeolu and Waka, we find that there is no better way of doing decoloniality. If we want to do decoloniality appropriately, we must combine our efforts. And in this argument, what Ezeolu does not realize is that his idea is actually complementary to that of Nwaka, and Nwaka does not realize too that his own idea is complementary to that of Ezeolu. Ezeolu thinks that in order to confront the white man appropriately, he has to send his son to a white school so that the white learns about Western epistemologies, so that he knows what he's fighting against to be able to counter it. Nwaka, on his part, thinks that the white man must be chased out of Igbo land, either forcefully or using any other means. Whichever way we go, Ezeolu and Nwaka have the same idea. They want to achieve the same goal. And the idea of chasing and learning, they are actually complementary, because for you to chase somebody out appropriately, you need to know who that person is and what that person has brought. From that perspective, I have tried to structure my discussion into 2 or 3 different questions. The first question I try to answer is, what is decoloniality? And in brief, the answer I gave to this question is that decoloniality is not a single thing. It is different things in different places by different people, because colonialism or coloniality is not uniform. If you take a country such as Cameroon, for instance, where I happen to find myself, that was colonized by the French and the British, the way decoloniality is done in the French part of the country would not be the same manner in which it is done in the British part of the country, because the 2 colonial masters brought 2 different systems of administration. The French came with a direct rule that was meant to assimilate the indigenes, and then the British came with indirect rule that was meant to foster administration by the natives so that they could just incorporate to whatever the British were talking about. Then the second remark I make about what is decoloniality is that decoloniality is a very complex phenomenon, a complex term. Nobody can claim decolonial universals. What we have to keep talking about is decolonial universals in such a way that the way it's done in Nigeria would be different from the way it is done in Kenya, in Zambia, or in Ghana. But what is most important is that it should be done in such a way that researchers from these regions can cooperate. Then, from that perspective, my conclusion about the definition of decoloniality is that it is something to different people at different times in different locations. In his famous article, What Makes a Concept Good, John Gehring suggests that the qualities needed for a concept to be considered good are 8-fold. There should be familiarity, there should be resonance, there should be parsimony, coherence, differentiation, depth, theoretical unity, and field unity. Decoloniality subscribes to all these terms, these qualities. But the problem is that decoloniality is not parsimonious. It's not that kind of term that you can say that this is exactly what it means. So it's a process of, we keep inventing as we do decoloniality, as we fight resilient colonialism. In my second part of the discussion, I try to answer the question, what does researching decoloniality entail? And I try to answer that by looking at a few steps that I think have to do with researching decoloniality. And I indicate these steps in detail, but I would just try to indicate the basics. For instance, in one of the areas I say that researching decoloniality implies recognizing the need and urgency of delinking from the colonial matrix of power. Secondly, that it entails challenging the westernized university as a site where learning and production, acquisition, and dissemination of knowledge are embodied in the Eurocentric epistemologies that are posited as objective, disembodied, and universal. I also indicate that researching decoloniality implies identifying colonial resurgencies. What I mean by colonial resurgencies are those elements of colonialism that keep surfacing. For instance, if you watch television or you looked at social media recently when the Queen of England died, it was as if almost everybody was talking about the Queen of England. People forgot about their various activities That's still part of colonialism. If you watch the way our brothers and sisters talk about European football leagues, like the Premier League, like the Spanish League, La Liga, like the French League, they even argue and fight. You have houses where somebody does not talk to another person because he's a supporter of Arsenal and the other one is a supporter of Liverpool. That's what I mean by resurgence, is that we have to keep fighting against. Researching decoloniality also has to do with identifying and recognizing the emergence of decolonial pluriversals. What I mean here is that we need to recognize that there are no longer universals, because universals represent what we sometimes identify as macro narratives. And macro narratives speak as if they were meant for everybody. And that's what Eurocentrism is all about. I've also indicated that researching decoloniality implies that we need to incorporate what Jackie Alexander calls pedagogies of crossing. Those pedagogies that keep helping us to cross from one epistemology to the other. That's what I mean. And then lastly, I have indicating that researching decoloniality implies that we have to be creative. It is an incomplete journey and we have to keep moving. In my next question, I try to answer, at the next level of my presentation, I try to look at what is post-colonial research. It's a very complicated thing. Sometimes we have reached a level where everybody talks about post-colonial research. Everybody talks about, I'm doing post-colonial research, I'm doing this, and then sometimes we don't know exactly what it's all about. And I've indicated 4 things that post-colonial research could focus on, that it could investigate human experiences that have been traditionally sidelined and silenced by Western epistemologists, that it is that research, secondly, that it is that research that focuses on the experience of colonization, but not necessarily a catalog of victimhood. And that is one thing that we have to keep aside when we talk about post-colonial research. We have to come out of this issue of always seeing ourselves as victims. Then 3, that post-colonial research needs to expose the violence inherent in a particular concept of reason. And that creates that gulf between European moral philosophy and its practical, political, and symbolic outcomes. I'm talking here about the rhetorics of modernity that are quite often hardly ever fulfilled. And then the last thing I indicate is that post-colonial research has to focus on countering Western illusions that see everything as essential and see everything simply from the from the Eurocentric point of view. And then this next part of my presentation, I tried to answer the question, what does Africanizing post-colonial research entail? We may talk about post-colonial research. I have this expression from Aníbal Quijano, the Latin American philosopher. I always like to borrow from him. He quite often says that the problem with Africanizing or Latinizing post-colonial research is the fact that there are people who stand with us but not for us. And that there are so many people who find themselves within colonial zones, but actually they are colonialists. And he tries to indicate the fact that somebody belongs to the area of the marginalized does not mean that that person is ready to fight marginalization. And he always ends up by saying that there's a difference between what he identifies as epistemic location and then subaltern epistemic location. Somebody could be in Africa who actually has the mentality of a Westerner. And in that way, the person would be doing a lot of the wrong post-colonial research. I hasten here slowly to make reference to one of my countrymen, Hassan Yosimbom. At some point in Africa, we were at a level where if you had to do post-colonial research, you had to quote Hassan Yosimbom. I wonder whether people will be able to quote him now, given what he did last time by associating himself with Macron and moving around in that colonial agenda. Maybe we are going to quote him no longer with inverted quotes, but super inverted quotes. But those are some of the issues that Africanizing post-colonial research has to do with. I've been identified 3 things that for us to Africanize post-colonial research, we need to identify the privileged positions of African identity and difference and question them. Here, I start with people like us within the university circles, where sometimes we think that when we speak, we say the final word, and then the local man in the quarter has nothing to say again about post-colonial research. The Latin Americans have worked successfully with this because most of their post-colonial research and decolonization, decoloniality is done mostly by some of the revolutionary groups, like the Zapatistas, who had the famous leader, Comandante Marcos, that they decide everything is done by the people, the local people, and not necessarily within the universities. My second point is that Africanizing post-colonial research entails recognizing Africa's position with regard to Europe and asserting that post-colonial research is not, and I insist, an anti-European thought, but the product of encounters between Europe and the world, and the worlds it once made its distant positions. Here, what I mean is that we cannot throw out the baby with the baby bath, because that would be terrible. We need to delink, but we need to know what we are delinking to relink to. And we must not condemn epistemologists simply because they're coming from the Western world. Then lastly, my last point about Africanizing post-colonial research is that one of the most important things we need to do to be able to Africanize post-colonial research is that we need to realize that decoloniality and Africanizing post-colonial research reminds us that we are standing or located in the margin. And the margin here, I want to quote, to borrow a quote from the African-American feminist Bell Hooks, that we identify the margin as much more than a site of deprivation. We make it a site of radical possibility, a space of resistance, and a central location for the production of counter-hegemonic discourse that is not just found in words, but in habits of being and the way we live our lives. I don't know how much time I have. I would like to problematize my presentation. I want to end it by making reference to two stories. I call them anecdotes. The story is told of a sociologist that once visited an indigenous community. It could have been Africa or somewhere else. And then they decided that they were going to create a museum. So they gathered the artifacts in the museum, and then each ethnologist or sociologist came out and spoke one after the other. What they did was they invited the people they called community leaders. Each spoke one after the other, spoke about the museum, spoke about the artifacts there. And then at the end of their discussions, they asked the community leaders, well, what do you think of our presentations? And one of the community leaders said a very interesting thing. Well, these people you are talking about sound like very interesting people. We hope to meet them one day. And then definitely the community leader was not saying that the presenters did not say anything reasonable. Definitely what they were saying was that you spoke from an ivory tower, an intellectual ivory tower, without even seeking our opinions about who we are and what these artifacts stand for. So if you see it that way, then we are not the ones. And then we hope to make these people one day, because these people do not resemble us. That's the same thing that we do quite often as post-colonial researchers. We use the university and forget that there is life out there out of the university. And then at the same time that we are de-westernizing and decolonizing everything we do, at some point we need to start de-universalizing what the things we do, so that we are contributing to society and society is contributing to us. The next story that I want to end with, a story is told that an interviewer once asked India's Mahatma Gandhi, Mahatma, what do you think of Western civilization? And Gandhi is said to have responded in a very funny way. His response was, that would be a good idea. Another story says that Gandhi responded by saying, I never knew they had any. Just like the community leaders, Gandhi is not saying that these people do not have a civilization. Gandhi is simply saying that we are going to recognize this civilization when they start thinking that theirs is not the only civilization in the world, that there are all other civilizations that when they come together, they can make a powerful universe. Basically, what I think that the researching decoloniality and then Africanizing post-colonial research entails is that we need, that it is focused on one thing, that we need to create the awareness that the world should be a place where many other worlds coexist and transculturate. And then there should be this commingling and mingling where there's transculturation, where people converse, where there are conversations, cultural conversations instead of cultural conversion. Because beginning from the period of colonialism, right up to decoloniality, what Western epistemologists are still interested in doing are, they want conversions. They insist on conversions. They don't accept conversations. They see every other person that is out of the West as indigenous, forgetting that the West too, everything begins from an indigenous community. Thank you so much, Dom. Thank you so much, everyone. I'm going to pause here. I don't know if I surpassed the time I was given. I'm sorry.
Thank you so much, Hassan. No, you did not really, because they were like the little like connection issues. We started a bit late, so you were perfectly on time. So thank you so much for your presentation, and like the story you told us before invited us of like leaving the ivory tower of the academia. But I have a question, as our seminar is about this ivory tower and how to kind of climb it. I'm going to bring you back there. And so the text you invited us to read in connection to this presentation was the Mignolo and Walsh on decoloniality, and Mignolo in one of the chapter is sharing his ideas on decoloniality as a disruptor for the academia, for the university, this outside perspective that comes and disrupt. In your experience, as you know, former doctoral fellow and postdoc, that as I told in your bio, like had experience like in Ghana, in Cameroon, in South Africa. What are the resistance that you found on your way as you start developing a decolonial approach that you integrated from, of course, like a lot of elders, and you mentioned Anibal Curano as one of your inspirations. So could you tell us a bit about your trajectory and the resistance that you found along the way? As you said, of course, also like there's a lot of people in so-called subaltern spaces that might also embody and fight those fights against those who want to decolonize.
Okay, thank you for that question, Dom. I want to share an experience. I remember the day I was supposed to my thesis, my doctoral thesis actually forays into some of the issues I was talking about. It centers on the bi-cultural nature of Cameroon, the Anglophone part and the Francophone part. I remember that the day of my defense, there was one of my examiners who basically did not ask me a single question because that examiner, who happened to have been the head of department, comes from one part of the country where they think everything is fine, and we come from a part of the country where we think everything is not fine. I remember during the day of the defense, basically, he did not ask me any question. And he was so bitter that I took the audacity to talk about identity formation and performance in a society such as ours. And then to him, it was a no-go area. This is a university professor who does not want us to talk about decoloniality. I looked at that experience, and then as I was even thinking that was too bad, I came out of the defense room, there were some of my family members that came to attend the defense. So when I told them that in that talk I was doing, I was arguing that the Anglophones should be recognized as an equal part of the community. One of my aunties said something terrible. He said that those things I was saying there are not what they want. That I was talking about big things, that they want these basic things that the government should be able to give them. So that's part of it, that's part of what we encounter on a daily basis. That sometimes I've had so many occasions where I think I'm speaking for people, and then they tell me that that's not the way we see it. And then sometimes we even wonder, because the papers we publish, I've published a few papers on coloniality and then the Anglophone, Francophone bifurcation in Cameroon, but I wonder whether those people in those subaltern spaces ever get to read those papers. So are we throwing water on a duck's back? maybe there are some other people within the house who can throw more light on that.
Thank you, Hassan. We have question in the chat. Professor Nyam, would you want to ask the question directly, or otherwise I will read it for Hassan? And everybody, you can either choose to either just ask your question in the chat or directly. Thank you.
Yeah, the question was first, excellent presentation, Hassan, and could you draw on your ongoing research to substantiate some of the things that you so brilliantly highlighted?
Okay, thank you so much, Prof, for that question. I have done a series of papers on what I actually talked about. One of my papers, one of my famous papers, I really like it, and I'm going to share with the group. The title of that paper is Uncoupling Spectres of Coloniality in Francis B. Nyamjo's works, where I actually identify about 6 forms of coloniality. I've discussed coloniality of language, coloniality of power, coloniality of gender, and then a series of others. And then I've actually indicated that within Cameroon, and I'm sure the same thing sometimes happens in South Africa, we already have situations, what I identify as coloniality of victimhood, because within my community, the marginalized community in Cameroon is made up of the Anglophones, and the Anglophones are divided into the Northwest and the Southwest regions. What I call coloniality of victimhood is that even within that margin that I talked about earlier on, the people from the Southwest think that the people from the Northwest, even though all of them are Anglophones, are inferior to the people from the Southwest. So they have a pidgin expression that they refer to the people from the Northwest. They call them come no go. And that's why what I identify as coloniality of victimhood. There are a series of other papers too that I've done on decoloniality. And presently, I am actually working on a project where I'm trying to look at how we could Africanize African literature, because that's my background. Quite often I go back to the literary field because that's where I come from. How we can Africanize African literature and at the same time globalize it. So I have been trying to do some of those things, especially the paper on coupling spectres of coloniality. I'm going to share it with colleagues after the presentation. Prof, I hope I did try to answer your question.
Yes, please, you did. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Hassan. I guess I would want to invite you to share even more about, you as you said, you are a specialist of African literature, and could you maybe give us more examples of how that field can be successfully Africanized, if you have examples from your own work or work that have inspired you. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, Dom, as I was doing the presentation, I was just thinking about this lady from Zimbabwe. I think she's in the diaspora, but she hails from Zimbabwe. No Violet Bulawayo. She has this novel, We Need New Names. that I really like. I like the novel so much because just the title of the novel indicates that we need to rename a lot of things. And one of the passages that I really admire in that novel, there is this small boy, this small lady, a character, the name is Darling, and the amount of, or the quantity of decolonization or decoloniality that little girl does in that text surpasses what you and I have been doing in the academia for so many years. And there is an episode where that small girl, Darling, ridicules the colonial master. There is an area within the text, they call that area Budapest, where the wealthy people in Zimbabwe live. And then they come from, ironically, where they live, the poor part of Zimbabwe, they call it paradise. So what they do is, most often they escape to Budapest to go and steal mangoes. They go there on one of the occasions, they steal mangoes and eat, and then Darling sits down, some of her age mates, and makes an analogy about colonialism that is very, very destructive to the colonial master. She says that she's shocked that the colonial master, or the people who came to Zimbabwe to steal the country, that they were so naive. That how could somebody, a grown-up, a white man for that matter, steal a country? That people should learn to steal mangoes and guavas like they do. Something very small that when you are caught, you can even hide it in your pocket and then say that, no, I did not, I didn't do it. But how could somebody try to steal a country? That you cannot hide a country. And within that context, Bulawayo is making a very important statement that the things that we have to go out and de-westernize and decolonize and decolonialize, they are so overt that the white man cannot hide from them. And then, in terms of what I said earlier, Bulawayo is actually saying that you don't even need to be a university professor to take part in decolonization or decoloniality. Everybody does it. Everybody does it. Imagine that the young girl, Darling, in that novel were invited for a UN conference, and then she makes that analogy. Definitely all colonial masters will bow down their heads in shame. So those are some of the things that I try to draw on. And then there is this lady from Ethiopia also. She's also in the diaspora, Maza Mengest. She has very good works in this whole concept too. And then the good thing with Maza Mengest is that she's very, very vocal too when it comes to public presentations. Then I do a lot of my things. I listen a lot to the Nigerian writer Chimamanda Ngozi, because she says a lot of very important things about decoloniality too. Thank you, Doc.
Thank you so much. And there's a question in the audience, like just to identify and share the name of the novel you discuss, I think from Zimbabwe.
Okay, the title of the novel is We Need New Names.
We need new names, yeah.
Yes, we need new names. Nova Bulawayo. In fact, I just wanted to indicate that she has a new novel that was published just last year. It was actually nominated for the Booker Prize for Men. It was one of the finalists. The title of the novel is Glory, where she actually talks about the demise of Robert Mugabe.
Hassan, I have a question just because I'm curious. I think that you're a great storyteller. Are you also have you also practiced creative writing in addition to your academic practice?
Yes, I tried them, but that's where I have a problem. Each time I try to write a story, I find that because I've been used to critical writing most often, there's this tendency, I try to bring myself into the story. I write a poem, it's like I want to be the one talking in the poem. So it's something that, and that's what I was thinking. If I could get lessons on creative writing or a course on creative writing, I would really be very ready to take it, because quite often I impose myself on what I want to write as if I were doing a critical analysis. That's the major problem I have.
And do you think the question of format and the question of the kind of constraint that we feel we have and we experience in the writing, do you think they are also part of the kind of hegemony and burden that we carry? And that you're also trying to fight against in your critical work.
Yes, exactly, Dom. Because sometimes as writers, especially from our own part of the planet, the problem we face is that sometimes as critical writers or creative writers, we practice what I call interiorized violence without actually realizing it, in the sense that sometimes the people we want to fight against are the publishers who impose a lot of roles on us. But sometimes, because we cannot confront them directly, sometimes we fight with our work without realizing it. Let me just share an experience with you. About 1 week ago, I had submitted an article to Critique. Critique is a big journal there in the Western world. They think that before you publish there, you must be one big person. So the 2 reviewers who reviewed my article actually indicated that they would want to read the revised version, and so that they see whether it is already ripe for publication. But though the editor wrote to me saying that the article has been rejected. When I wrote back to him or her saying that, but your reviewers are saying that they would be very ready to go through the revised version, the editor told me that he or she unilaterally decided to reject the article. So that's where the problem is. If I must do something extra to be able to publish there, then it affects my writing too. Maybe I'm writing a poem and I'm thinking about publishing it in Critique, and I say that the people in Critique must like it. No longer even my audience, it is the people in Critique who must like it. Dom must not like it because Dom is not an editor in Critique. And sometimes, quite often, it affects the way we write.
Thank you for sharing that experience. We have an observation from our friend Babaka, who is saying that having a decolonial mindset is everybody's business, and it should be an inside-out self-reflectivity attitude. I don't know if Babaka has any question following that, but in the meantime, we have also a question from Divine. Divine, do you want to unmute, or do you want me to read the question? Okay. So I'm going to read the Divine's question. So Hassan, how do we move from decolonization as an abstract critic to decolonization as a methodological tool? So I think you can see the question in the chat.
Yes, I can. Yes. Thank you, Divine. That's a tough one. That's a tough one. Because there are situations where that movement does not depend on us. Virtually everybody would want to move. I remember the chapter I suggested for reading by McDowell. He actually says something very important there. He says that there are times when the academia, they face a lot of problems, because when you're applying for a research grant, that you just need to say that your research grant is meant for decoloniality and it's rejected. So that's one of the major problems. How do we move? I think that one of the ways by which we could move freely is what Huma has been doing. I've not been in Huma for long, but the seminars that I've attended with Huma, I think I can vouch for Huma. One of the ways is we start having our projects where we fund our projects and do our discussions the way we have been doing with the disobedience projects in Huma, without bothering whether somebody accepts what we are doing or somebody does not accept what we are doing. That's one of the best ways. I don't know where money will come from, but we need to have people amongst us who can fund some of these projects, and then they will not look at the project proposal and say that this is not what we want. They will look at the project proposal and then simply say that this is innovative and we accept it. Hello, Divine. I hope I did grapple with your question.
He might not answer because I think he mentioned he can't unmute. So we'll just have to guess.
Okay.
Okay, he said great. So he's satisfied. So you mentioned the disobedience workshop that we have held at Huma for the last year, where all the fellows discussed their research and also issue very very similar to the one we're discussing today, and you've been with us. Do you have suggestion or recommendation for our doctoral fellows that you're very familiar with, and also with other doctoral fellows that may, for example, that you may encounter in Cameroon and in your city?
Yeah, I think that for now, what I know as I think what I've observed is like you indicated at the beginning of the presentation, I have had the opportunity to do postdoctoral work in other places, but the one thing that I have observed about humor, the disobedience seminars, I've learned a lot. I've learned a lot just by listening to presentations and discussions by humor postdoc colleagues. There are other colleagues that I've actually shared work with them, like Sanya, and then the kind of things I've learned from them. I think it's wonderful. For now, let me just continue learning. Maybe when I should have learned to my field, then I'll be able to make suggestions. But it's a wonderful thing. It's a wonderful thing. When I got to the project in humor, I realized that, as I always say, there are postdocs and there are postdocs, and then I'm really happy, and I want to thank all of you. I'm really happy to be part of this community.
Thank you, Hassan, for those encouragement. We have a few of our doctoral fellows in the room. Do you have any question about Hassan's work and his pursuit and his effort? So please, we have a few minutes left in our session, so don't hesitate to ask question or discuss the issues you may have. In the meantime, I'm just looking at the chat to see if there's more questions that I might have overlooked. We have a question by Alison. Alison, do you want to unmute, or do you want me to read the question?
Sure. Thanks, Dominique. Thanks so much, Hassan, for your presentation. I have to jump off very quickly because I have to teach at 5. But my question was, obviously you have more experience and kind of more time to kind of develop and deepen your relationship with decoloniality. And so I was curious about how along your academic journey, how has your relationship to decoloniality changed, if at all?
Okay, thank you, Alison. I think it keeps changing every day. It keeps changing every day because sometimes you read a book on decoloniality and you think that, this is what I was missing. And by the time another one comes up, you realize it keeps changing because society keeps evolving. And then the way people reason keeps evolving too. So it keeps changing. One of the things, for instance, is that in the past, it was so hazy. I couldn't make a distinction between decolonization and decoloniality. But now, after the sessions with humor and other people I've encountered, I could make it, now I clearly make a distinction between disobedience, I make a distinction between decolonization, I can make a distinction between decoloniality. And now I have even moved to areas where I'm talking about de-westernization, I'm talking about delinking, I'm talking about re-westernization. And then what I discover is that in the past, when I just started engaging into decoloniality or decolonial issues, I thought that it was something you could just say, I don't want the white man, or I don't want Western epistemologists. But again, you cannot function like that. Like I say, you cannot throw away the bathwater with the baby. The Western epistemologists are already there, they are the baby. We cannot throw them away. We have to keep conversing with them. But conversing this time around in our own terms, no longer in their own terms. So it's a continuous journey, Alison. It keeps changing. I don't know what it's going to look like tomorrow. It's like a bird in its wings. It's flying and we don't know where it's going to land. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Hassan.
Thank you, Hassan. Do we have any other questions from the audience? Otherwise, Hassan, do you have last words for us? Anything that you would like to share about your research?
Yes. The last thing I want to share, Dom, is that from the very elderly people I've interacted with in terms of research, since you said the doctoral students are there. At some point when we were in school, we thought that the best research topic is the one that sounds very complicated and very loaded with words. As we grow and as you interact with the elderly people, one of the things you realize is that if you are choosing a research topic, for instance, do not include a word in your research topic that is a complicated term. Do not include a word that has controversy. It should be something that you can easily handle the terminology of your research topic before even moving into it. In the past, we used to think that when you take some of those very complicated things, it means that you're highly educated. But I think the purpose of research is to communicate your findings, and you cannot communicate your findings by using complicated vocabulary. That's the little I would want to share with the postdoc students.
Thank you, Hassan. Yeah, I can see that Sane has a last question. So Sane, please unmute yourself.
Thank you, Dom, and thank you, Hassan, for the great presentation. I'm just like wondering, who do you think should do the decolonial work? Because like some scholars argue that like academics or scholars in academia are very like influenced and they're very trained in like Western tradition. So who do you think should do like decolonial work that is like authentically African? Is that like even possible? Thank you.
Thank you, Sani. I think that when we talk about authenticity, something that is authentically African, I think that what we mean by something that is authentically African is not that it must be completely separated from the Western ideologies. I take again the example of Walter D. Mignolo. In one of the chapters in that book, he actually indicates that the people who have mastered decoloniality after the Cold War, the collapse of the Soviet Union, is actually China. That there is something China does so successfully that other communities do not do. What they do is they copy without being assimilated. They copy and maintain their authenticity. They copy to add to what they already have. And he talks about the example of the language, for instance, the way they use Mandarin. Even though most of the scholars in China now, they speak English, but they still know that their most important language is Mandarin. So we must copy, but if I could suggest, we copy slowly. There is no authenticity. Nobody is an island. If we start talking about decoloniality that makes us an island, it's not going to work because we must live with these people. We must live with these people. Like Frantz Fanon says, the only thing about decoloniality that we should take note of is that if every day we wake up, as he says in his book, we pray that God should make our bodies a questioning body so that we keep asking questions. We cannot dissociate ourselves from the Western world. That's my point of view, though.
Thank you, Hassan, and I hope that Sane is satisfied, or at least that you're going to continue conversation together at UMA. Thank you so much, Hassan, for accepting our invitation to this doctoral seminar. It's always a pleasure to receive guests that are also UMA colleagues, because it's a particular opportunity for us to get to know each other's research, in addition to presenting material that can be useful for the doctoral fellows. So thank you so much. It was a pleasure. And next session, we are actually going to also have one of our colleagues as a guest. It's going to be our senior researcher, Sanya Osha. It's going to be in October. So we are going to share all of the information in a few weeks about this next session. I hope you'll be well. Thank you so much, Hassan. Thank you, everybody in the audience. And yes, hope to see you all next time.
There's a hand up somewhere, Dom. There are two hands up.
No, they are clapping. They are happy.
Okay.
Those are happy.
Okay.
They are congratulating you. They are not.
Okay, thank you, Dom. Thank you. Thank you so much.